We can learn so much from biology and how it adapts to the changing environment. Taking lessons from coronavirus, I'm interested to learn the mechanisms in which viruses change and adapt as a result. In this episode, we want to answer 3 fundamental questions. What drives evolution? What role does the environment play in evolution? And how can we apply this to designing complex evolving economic systems? Before we get started, let's have a quick crash course on biology. Genes are the basic unit of hereditary information. They are the language that nature uses to build, maintain, and repair organisms. It keeps information and data to build proteins so that we can function normally, like you listening to the podcast now. In simple words, genes are basically ingredients and herbs. They follow a recipe to cook a delicious meal, and then we get to eat that meal. Initially, I wanted to talk about DNA and its evolution since the beginning of Homo sapiens. But that takes hundreds of thousands of years. So I'll just focus on the evolution of virus instead. Viruses, specifically RNA-based virus, evolves a lot faster, and they're adapting more to the changes in the environment a lot quicker. So the specific virus that we want to talk about today is coronavirus. Coronavirus is a hot topic of this period. It's the cause of common cold. Now, this strain of coronavirus is different because it is able to transmit from animals to humans and then between humans. This is the part of evolution that we want to discuss today. There are many types of coronavirus. We have SARS, which was a transmission of virus from bats to civet cats to humans. We have MERS, which is the transmission from camels to humans. And now we have the COVID-19, which is the transmission from bats to humans. Some also say that it may come from pangolins, but that's still not peer-reviewed. The general consensus that these viruses or these types of coronavirus transmitted from animals to humans and then between humans. So the then between humans part is something that we're going to discuss today. There's 3 ways viruses can change, either mutation, pseudo-recombination, or recombination. Today we're just going to focus on mutation. Viruses can mutate in 2 ways. They can either mutate genes of humans or mutate their own genes. And the virus that we're talking about, coronavirus, is mutating their own genes. Mutating human genome is hard. It's very, very tough. It's like changing the entire recipe that you downloaded online. Changing your own genome is a lot easier. It's like just changing specific ingredients to cook your meal. Instead of using butter to cook this chocolate cake, you are substituting butter with oil instead. It's easier to change. Now, before we get all paranoid about mutation and changing and everything, a good note is that mutation is a natural part of the virus life cycle. Viruses always mutate. Always. And it's okay because there are a lot of errors in mutation, and in general, it's not that dangerous. And this mutation is also really helpful to help us to understand how virus travels and change. So, for example, this is really good in terms of biology or epidemiology. So this is really good in biology because then we can understand how viruses change, how it adapts. And a lot of game theorists are looking at how cancer cells change or how viruses adapt to look at how can we stop this evolution of cancer cells in patients. And there are a lot of different mechanisms at play. But let's not go so deep into that. Let's just talk about the general idea and how we can apply this to designing ecosystems. So, for mutation to become more prominent, multiple genes have to mutate. This means that all the different individual genomes that the virus has to mutate and coordinate in the mutation and agree to the change. As viruses evolve, they mutate its gene structure. What it does, as I said, one of the key things is that it binds humans, or it is able to transmit between humans. How does it do that? It binds to human proteins, replicates, and spreads to other humans. So let's take a look at the example of dumplings. Dumplings has a general structure. It's flour wrapped around meat. Then you boil, cook, steam, fry, whatever, to eat it. Now, it changes, mutates, evolves according to the various countries' culture and environment. For example, we have Indian momos, Polish pierogies, Japanese gyoza, Chinese xiaozi, or even Italian ravioli. These countries have specific dumplings that have bind to humans. It replicates, spreads, and becomes the new norm of cultural food in that country. In the same way, viruses adapt, change to the different environment that it's exposed to, and when it succeeds in mutation, it becomes the new norm. So it becomes the virus that's stable in humans, that can be transmitted from humans to humans because other humans adapt to it. So let's talk a little bit more about this virus. This virus is specifically an RNA virus. Before we talk about RNA, quick crash course, another crash course on RNA versus DNA. Think of DNA like a top chef, like Gordon Ramsay. He has all the recipes and methods in his head. To cook a dish, he has his recipe book, or he just has all the recipes in his head. Think of his brain like a master blueprint. He has all the information available, and he can just extract whatever information that's needed to cook roast pork or to cook a Sunday morning roast. In the same vein, DNA is also a master blueprint. It has all the recipes to build the different proteins that our DNA needs, and it has all the information like genetic data inside. Then you have RNA. RNA will be people like me, amateur chef that can cook after watching one YouTube episode. It's very easy to follow. All I have to do is just transcribe what he says and replicate it. So I'm basically translating the specific recipe into steps, then I can follow them. Now, the difference is that with DNA, with Gordon Ramsay, he has all the information. He has all the recipes in his head. For me, I just need a specific recipe. Today, I wish to cook steak, and I can just follow his recipe to cook whatever steak that he's talking about, or like beef Wellington. So I'm not going to download all the recipes that he has and then transcribe all of them so that I can cook the beef Wellington. I'm just noting the specific recipe needed, watch that specific episode, transcribe them, and then create them. Sometimes I forget a step on an ingredient, sometimes I miss it, or sometimes I cook it in the wrong way, or I didn't preheat the oven, or I didn't put it at the right temperature. So, because I don't have all the data at the back of my head, I'm just watching one episode, taking all the information, and then trying to create. So, during this process, I make some mistakes. In the same vein, RNA is also the same. RNA doesn't have all the information. It just takes the specific information needed from DNA to build the protein or to build the structure, and that can add into the whole DNA structure that you always see, the double helix curve. So it only takes the information that it needs. And thus it can make mistakes, and mistakes also leads to evolution, leads to mutation. So this COVID-19 is an RNA virus. That means it's easier to make mistakes, mutate, and change. Long story short, the virus binds the ACE2 to initiate membrane fusion and to enter human cells. In simple terms, just think of me wearing makeup, and putting on Gordon Ramsay's clothes, and pretend to be a chef like him in his kitchen to cook for his guests. So, something to note is that RNA-based viruses, like the COVID virus or the flu, tend to mutate around 100 times faster than DNA-based ones. And that's also why I'm talking about this episode as from a virus perspective of how viruses change and evolve, and how can we apply this to designing economic systems compared to DNA. Because DNA means changing the entire structure, changing the entire blueprint, whereas RNA is changing specific aspects that could affect the entire environment or entire ecosystem in general. Because remember, DNA is the whole blueprint. There's a lot of aspects to change, whereas RNA is just one specific thing that changes all the time and can create very lasting impacts when all of the other cells and genomes and protein and genetic code agree to this change. So moving on to part 2, let's unpack some fundamental drivers to virus evolution patterns. There are two drivers that we're going to talk about, especially for this RNA COVID-19 virus. Mutation occurs as part of evolution. That's very true. Mutation always occurs. Mutation is always ongoing. However, it does not last. Biologically, about 87 to 95% of mutations are just removed from negative selection, because mutation can't survive when they're not beneficial. The mechanisms of evolution is where organisms that are better to adapt to the environment survives. Basic Darwinian theory. That means we have to adapt as evolution happens, as environment changes, and not allow the environment to suit what we want. And because RNA is such versatile, it's able to change so easily, it can just change based on the different environment. Example of environment in which RNA changes is that from bats, the environment and the DNA or the genetic structure of bats is very different from humans. And this change is where COVID-19 virus is adaptable to this change in environment. And it adapts to the human cells and human genomes, which is why we can spread between humans. The other thing is the network effects of mutation. It is easier to mutate because of network effects. With this coronavirus, there are two strains, the L type and the S type. And the transmission rates are very different from different strains. The L type is more dominant and it spreads a lot quicker when you are interacting with different people. So that's why they talk a lot about staying at home and trying to flatten the curve. Because when you interact less with people, you reduce the network effects, you reduce your contact with other people, and you reduce the probability of spreading, or the probability of passing the virus somewhere else. So network effects can be for good and for bad. Network effects just allow something to spread a lot quicker. If it's something that's good, if it's a good thing that we want to keep spreading, then we want to increase network effects. If something that's not so good like this virus, we want to reduce the spread of it, then stay at home, reduce virus, cut off connections, and contain the virus within a specific ecosystem like your house. So let's talk a little bit more about the resolution mechanisms, because sometimes things happen, shit happens, it's normal, it's just life. What we can do is to look at how can we resolve that? How can we prevent these things from happening? Or when they happen, how can we reduce the collateral damage? So the first one is having proper resolution mechanisms. The increasing number of viral sequences has led to unprecedented observations of viruses all around the world. All scientists and epidemiologists and biologists, they're all looking at the virus and having a lot of observations, sharing them around the world. So now we have better understanding of the factors that lead to the virus's evolution. So it's almost like signaling, or we're looking at the different signals and factors before to understand how the virus changed. And how is this useful? This is useful because research is designing new strategies to govern the viral evolution and control the threats. So as long as there's some signals that this is how the virus changes, how the virus mutates, we can contain it and control it. The next thing is modeling. Modeling is something that everyone talks about. In financial markets, you talk about modeling. In marketing, you talk about modeling. In supply chain, you talk about modeling. And modeling is just using past data to kind of predict what the future is going to be and what the trajectory of the future is going to look like. In the same way, we can apply modeling in biology and virus evolution. So now we can understand virus evolution through computational modeling based on experimental data. And this is through computer science. Some people like to use AI, like to use machine learning. Whatever it is, there's a lot of data now that we can use to model and predict the future traction of how the virus look like. And this is also very useful when we are pairing that with different policies in place and how different governmental policies can either flatten the curve, which is part of modeling, or can help to maintain the demand of hospital beds and ICU beds and hospitals' capacity to contain the virus. So there are many different uses of modeling, and modeling can come as different parts of different gatekeeping ways to make sure that the virus is properly contained and resolved. So now let's move to the last part, which is probably the most interesting. How do you apply these lessons to designing economic systems? Firstly, we can understand the speed of change and mutation over time. We can estimate the clock, so the time needed, and to track the spread. It's very useful in times like this, where we see how different systems react. So coming back to economic systems, coming back to designing, token systems or blockchain-based systems or virtual systems, digital systems, we can see how different participants react when something happens in the outside world, or track how fast it changes, how fast people react. So an example will be in decentralized finance. Just a month ago, that sounds like it's a long time ago, there is a BZX. I would call it a hack. It's more of an exploitation with flash loans. And you can see that the speed of change has increased tremendously because everything is just interconnected in the digital space and everything is just pretty instantaneous. So this is very good. I won't call this a fault. It's more of like an experiment where we understand the speed of change, understand the different gatekeeping things that we need. For example, a stop loss or different pricing to trigger a stop loss. And this is also what beta testing is for. So we can better manage things when shit happens. And you know what? Shit always happens. There's going to be black swan effects. There's going to be things that's unprecedented that just happens. And they're always going to happen. So what we could do is to design better strategies to contain these, to contain the speed of change, to contain the mutation and evolution that we do not want. The second is understanding breaking points. So this is where when a virus or a bad actors just mess things up. So some questions to ask will be, how long can it be deployed successfully before a resistant breaking strain of the virus emerges? There are multiple factors, including virus resistance mechanism, the number of mutations sufficient to generate the restraints, and the effects of these mutations on the virus fitness. Everything can contribute to the estimate of resistance durability. So to put it in context of back to what we talk about designing ecosystems, is that you have to understand where things fail. You have to understand the different breaking points, and to understand the different how good your resistance mechanism is, how good your resolution mechanism is, how good the governance mechanism is, and how quickly will it change, or what's the percentage of coordination that needs to happen before things will break. So this is why we talk a lot about, the whole level of centralization versus decentralization. Because when you have a high level of centralization, you don't even need to collude anymore. You just need to get 3 people to come together. You don't need to collude in big form. You just get 3 people to agree on something, and it could break the system very easily. And that's why everyone in the blockchain space have always been focusing a lot on decentralization. So to put into context, Justin Sun from Tron wants to buy EOS, if I'm not wrong, and to buy Reputation, the company. And he will take all the power, all the voting power as well. And now he doesn't even need to collude. He himself with, 2 friends that own a lot of exchanges have so much voting power that you can build the most resistant mechanism design and governance mechanisms or resolution mechanisms, and it still doesn't work because this bad actor or this bad colluding group is just going to be the breaking point. It's just going to be the tipping point that everything just fails because they don't have to follow a lot of these things in place. And so this is something quite important to remember, is to what level of centralization or decentralization is needed to maintain the health of your ecosystem. Thirdly is to build resistance. So when shit happens, you can estimate the duration of how long that can last. And this resistance is not going to just be one resistance. There are different resistance barriers. So for example, in the past couple of weeks, the whole world is just melting down. And that's very evident in the financial market that we're looking at. So the S&P has been hitting the short circuit breaker 3 times. And so the S&P in general, when trade falls below 7%, when the trade falls below 7%, then the market will stop trading for 15 minutes. Then 15 minutes later, it will resume again. But this S&P is not just one resistance, right? It's not just 7%. You have 7%, you have 13%, you have 20%, you have different resistance breakers.
And this is something that is very important to consider when we're building different economic systems. It could be for decentralized finance systems. It could be for supply chain systems. It could be for insurance systems. The fact that we're using smart contracts to automate so many of these processes, we're focusing on automation that we're not having enough human inputs. That's okay when things are going good, right? Things are beautiful. You've got unicorns and roses and rainbows, and everything will flow as it is because it's very efficient, and the automation works as it is because there isn't much risk involved. However, during shit times, during downtimes, during your bull runs, smart contracts will automate the same way as it was designed to, but because there's so many other factors that needs to be considered. You have to think of the external damages, the secondary impacts of all these actions, that automation might not be the best way out. So instead of having just full automation during shit times, to build your resistance, it has to have a combination between part automation, part human. So when something happens, you have automation to stop it, have humans coming in for a period of time, then allow automation to continue again. And that's how humans and machines get to work together to form better governance, to form better resistance for different ecosystems. Blockchain is like our genomes, specifically pathogens. A pathogen's job is to invade the immune system to create more copies of itself and spread to the host. It's similar to blockchain copying the same data to every peer and distribute this data. So, blockchain and human DNA or human genomes is very, very, very similar. And we have a specific set of information that needs to be copied. So DNA has the same thing. You want to copy the DNA, and that's how our cells regenerate and how we heal and everything. And blockchain also has the same copy where it's immutable. That's the whole idea of blockchain. You have one data set, it's immutable, it's just being copied and shared with everyone. It's also about coordination. How do you coordinate all your different genomes to come together to build your different protein strain so that we can build this beautiful double helix structure, which is our DNA. Similarly, in blockchain space, we have different participants or different decentralized individual users working together to form or to coordinate actions towards building this outcome that we want. So in DNA, the outcome is this double helix, beautiful structure. In your ecosystem or your blockchain ecosystem is whatever you want your ecosystem to be building. So it could be, whatever social optimal function that you're looking at, or building an ecosystem that allows trade to flow easily, allows more authority to people, reduce intermediaries, whatever you're doing. It's about coordinating together and working together to reach that outcome. So that's the ideas that's some ideas of how we can apply these lessons to designing economic systems. And
if DNA is the master blueprint to our genomes, then the design of economic systems is the DNA of virtual systems. It is the master blueprint of our system that defines the revenue model, the business model, and everything else to coordinate the participants in an economic system.
Like viruses, ecosystems will continue to undergo co-evolution over a long period of time. Sometimes a benign relationship develops, and the virus doesn't really cause a negative impact, like a disease. Other relationships are negative, and they can cause very serious diseases to human bodies. And this is where you have different bad actors coming in to destroy the ecosystems that's being built.
The two main factors that change the characteristics of organisms are the blueprint of the ecosystem and the environment itself. The agents determine the makeup of the environment, and in economics we call that the market design. And we can define the blueprint via governance and the economic design of the system itself. We can coordinate agents, which are your different participants, your different genomes, virus genomes, or your different, your investors or user base of your ecosystem. And so therein lies the importance of community feedback, forums, and company updates.
This epidemic, it shows how important it is to be prepared, to have proper governance, to have, proper education, to have early detection of signaling. And so when we have all these in place, we talked about building resistance, where we have all these resistance and resolution mechanisms in place, then we don't have to pay a heavier price at the end. And heavier price will be, failures in systems, disbelief in the structure, having to restart everything from scratch, or a lot of different other negative impacts. So this is why I focus so much on governance, because when we have proper governance, we are prepared, we are able to defend all these external risks and external black swan activities. So we can still contain the situation, and we don't have to pay with a lot of negative social payment and financial payment in the future. So now before I end, I want to start with this thing where every time I end an episode, just have these 3 discussion takeaways worth pondering. If you have some ideas, you can just write them down in the YouTube comments, or just YouTube comments, or maybe the newsletter's comments, so we can be discussing them.
Question 1. Should we have a homogeneous ecosystem? With a homogeneous ecosystem, it's so much easier to coordinate the different agents because everyone has the same objective, everyone thinks alike. But it also runs counterintuitive to what evolution is about, because we need mutation and variation to enable change and to enable a different leap forward. So if you think about it, most companies present 100 years ago are not really present today, or they are not in the top 100 companies anymore, because there is evolution, there is change, and the surrounding allows us to change and evolve. However, here's the debate: should we promote a more homogeneous society or a heterogeneous society in a virtual landscape? Question 2: who is to judge what is a good action and what is a bad action, and what action can be promoted via the design of the economic systems? As designers, you have a lot of power through the way you design and structure the incentive mechanisms. So what is good to person A might be bad for person B. So how do we define the good action that benefits person A is better than the action that this specific action will be detriment to person B? And how do we ensure and allow that the system that we create is very fair and is egalitarian? Something to also consider in this question is the veil of ignorance by John Rawls. And a lot of people have been talking about it lately, because when it comes to policies and it comes to governance, this is something quite important to take into consideration. So how do we go about that? How do we judge what action is good and bad that needs to be promoted via the different incentive mechanisms? The last question: should we limit or encourage greater divergence as the ecosystem grows? When I talk about greater divergence, I'm talking about the way the decentralized governance mechanisms have in place. So do we look at more centralized or decentralized type of governance? Do we look at having more people involved and different types of people involved? The natural answer is yes, of course, we want as many people involved as possible, different backgrounds, different experiences, different knowledge. At the same time, we have to think about the consequences to that. When people are too heterogeneous, it's very difficult to come to conclusion together. There's huge information asymmetry, there's a lack of experience, lack of knowledge, which can lead to a lot of different issues. So before decisions can be made, the entire decision process or governance process is already just cluttered and fumbling, because there's too many things to be considering before a decision can be made. So that really just prolongs the suffering, prolongs the time taken to make decisions, or the time taken to govern the system. So to what extent should we limit or encourage divergence in the governance of systems?